Hey, everybody, it's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elizabeth Delfano. If you knew what it took to get me in this seat today, quite a busy day, but I would never miss the Plant-Based Business Hour. So here I am rolling up like I do every Tuesday live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 1 o'clock Pacific time. I often forget to say some of the basics about my own endeavors because I'm so dedicated to sharing knowledge, and hopefully you see this Plant-Based Business Hour as a knowledge drop. And if you do, please share it. Please share it and leave a review on iTunes. It only works to spend this much time on this podcast on a weekly basis if people actually hear it, and I count on you guys to do that. Again, this is a volunteer activity. Take no sponsors, take no prisoners. So this is just for open information, and I really do ask you to please share right now, actually, this podcast and leave a review on iTunes because it sure does help. At the same time, people always tell me, I can't believe you did an hour on the Plant-Based Business Hour and you didn't even talk about VegTech Invest. Yes, I am the CEO of VegTech Invest. And yes, investing in innovation for the future of our global food supply system, I do believe is a mega trend. And if you would like to learn more about that, just reach out to me personally. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me through the VegTech Invest website, but just come find me on LinkedIn. I do see, if you invested in semiconductors long before everybody and their brother had two, if not two computers and a phone, 2 or 3 computers, getting in early is not a bad idea. So lots going on in our space. So let's talk about that. Let's get right to it. I have one of my guests right at the airport before they head off to Paris. So happy to have Bill Aimutis here with me, the executive director of the North Carolina Food Innovation Lab, and Celia Homyak with me, who is the co-director of UC Berkeley's Alternative Meat Lab, the Alt Meat Lab. Thank you both, Bill and Celia, for being with me.
Thanks for Elizabeth. It's been a while since we talked.
I know it. So Bill's internet was great before we started, and now it's a little glitchy. So we'll hope that this comes back with us. Celia, it's great to have you here. Before I get right into it, because ultimately we started this episode talking a little bit about investing and what investing in innovation for shifting our global food supply system could look like. Well, then what we really need to know is, what is that innovation that's happening? So before we talk about what the two of you are seeing in the premier food innovation labs in the United States. Let me get a little background on each of you. Do you come from the management perspective or the engineering perspective? So Bill, let's hope your audio is with us. Can you share with me how many years you have been with the North Carolina Food Innovation Lab and what exactly you all do there?
So I came in a few years ago at the early design phase of the facility. General Assembly had appropriated and designed the facility, procured the equipment, hired the people, and now I'm running the facility. We're a plant-based focused R&D facility, product development facility that works with entrepreneurs as well as multinational foods to develop products, help them scale them up, and then get into the market.
Yeah, which is amazing that you're in North Carolina. Can I call that pig slaughter capital of the U.S.? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that was, we're probably number 2, number 3 in the nation for food processing. Most of it happens to be protein, but we also grow 90 different crops in the state of North Carolina, and most of those, unfortunately, leave our state for further processing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So North Carolina, big food state, and that would be live animals as well as crops. And what's fascinating to me is that North Carolina, from which you get a lot of funding, is, if I've got that correct, you just correct me if I'm wrong there, North Carolina is funding alternative proteins.
That's correct. And plant-based foods in general.
And plant-based foods in general. So hot damn. Well, one of the questions I didn't give you prior to this conversation is, what that looks like perhaps in terms of jobs. Let's circle back on that question. You might not actually know the answer, but you can think about it from a state perspective, folks. If the state of North Carolina is investing in alternative proteins, it's, I'm guessing, not from the cruelty-free perspective, but from the jobs and job opportunity perspective. So let's hold on to our bootstraps on that question. We'll circle back. Celia, if you could tell us what your background is a little bit and how long. So the North Carolina Food Innovation Lab has been around for a while, given Bill's 40 years experience therein. But how long has the UC Berkeley Alt Meat Lab been up and running? And how did you come to be co-director?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Elizabeth, for having me and us. This is great. So the Alt Meat Lab at UC Berkeley it's about 5 years old now. It's part of a center, Suchardia Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, which is 17 years old. 5 years ago, they realized alternative meats and alternative foods were advancing. So they wanted to form a sub-program combining technology and entrepreneurship training around specifically alternative foods. And so I came into this about a year ago, almost. But previously, I came from the food tech world. So I worked at Just and Ripple Foods before this.
So fascinating to me that the state of North Carolina and the University of California, Berkeley, both see the long-term perspective, long-term growth, long-term innovation, long-term jobs and research to be done, which I love to see this kind of triangular effect, if you will, which is what we're seeing here in this podcast, folks. So we have the university perspective, we have the state and sort of, I'll say, government perspective, and then we have innovation through entrepreneurs and what they're doing. So that private sector, coming with their ideas using public funds. Gets kind of confusing, all this public-private, using public funds through the state of North Carolina, or University of Berkeley has obviously state of California funds as well. So very interesting there. Okay, so let me start with Bill, and then we'll throw it to Celia. So all this talk in the newspapers lately is that plant-based is dead, if not dying, if not dead. Consumers aren't really interested, and that it's really going nowhere. So Bill, maybe you can tell me, what are you seeing take place in the North Carolina Food Innovation Lab?
Yeah, we really haven't seen a slowdown at all in our facility over the past 6 months. We have seen a shift a little bit from products that are being developed direct to the consumer back towards more B2B type products. So, and all those, of course, are plant-based products, or plant-based things. Ultimately, they go into a variety of things, all the way from alternative meats to alternative dairy, and even a center of the grocery store. I think the slowdown we're seeing right now is perhaps the customer has become a little bit fatigued, with the products that are in the market, kind of at that S curve now, where we're starting to look for second, third, fourth generation type products that will continue to improve, more effort towards these types of products.
So how does the process work? An entrepreneur comes to you and says, help us, or the state finds these prospective entrepreneurs looking to innovate? How does someone come to the North Carolina Food Innovation Lab?
A lot of people come right directly through our website, and we're kind of a guerrilla marketing group. So social media is one of our big friends, but we also have a strong word of mouth that's bringing in a lot of entrepreneurs to come in and potentially work with us. It's right now, our portfolio mix is roughly 45% entrepreneurs, and half of those are actually from the state of North Carolina, and about 45% multinational food companies. So we've got a nice balanced portfolio. We stay pretty busy with that. Also, because of the way we're operating the facility, we do get involved in some clinical studies of producing products, for these types of studies that are going on. And then we also have a couple of consulting engineering firms that come to us regularly, talking with multinationals, but just looking at one or two steps in the process.
That's fascinating to me. So when I think of an innovation lab, I think of young company, young entrepreneur, sort of someone who really needs help right out of the gate. But you're talking to me about multinational companies. So again, these large institutions, I'll call the state of North Carolina kind of its own large institution, certainly Berkeley, its own large institution, and multinationals, their own large institutions. So no one here of these large, deep-pocketed, relatively speaking, organizations, institutions think things are slowing down. Would that be accurate?
I don't think. Yeah, I think most of them think things are going to continue to go. we're looking at, as I said, we're looking at next generation products. And I think you'll see within the next year, you're going to see a lot of changes occurring, whether it be in the alternative meat space or even the alternative dairy space, as we begin experimenting, not just with singular proteins like we've done to this point, starting to see a lot more activity going on with mixed proteins and other ingredients coming in to improve these products.
So let's throw it over to Celia. Same to you, Celia. What are you seeing come down the pipeline? I don't want to lose Bill's thought where he's seeing real innovation through mixing products together. Let's explore that a little bit. First, let's level set. What are you seeing in terms of demand for your services? Are you seeing any slowdown? Because if you listen to the Wall Street Journal, Wall Street Journal, you and I do not agree about what it means to have quality journalism of late, given an opinion piece that was more like a rant. But okay, that aside, Celia, what are you seeing in terms of demand for your space and expertise?
Yeah, I mean, I can top on Bill. I really agree with him. I don't really see a slowdown, especially from like the innovation and academic side. If anything, we have more buy-in coming from students and organizations that are reaching out to us to advance it. I think the one thing that I noticed too is it's not necessarily a slowdown, but I think there's a clear shift in what's happening as to the types of products and the types of ingredients that we're making. And so I'm not sure if, the future is going to be, the next Impossible or beyond, but really a different array of products with different types of ingredients that are more diversified that are coming out of them. But the interest, especially from, the younger generation and the students is there, which is keeping us employed along with young entrepreneurs.
So let me understand what happens at Berkley. Is it mostly students that come through your doors, or do you also work with multinationals?
Both. So we're a self-funded facility. And so we are funded by the state, philanthropic funders, and also big corporations. So we hire students to help on research initiatives with these big corporations, such as Nestle, Louis Dreyfus Company, Millipore Sigma. But also we teach students here combining food technology courses along with entrepreneurial courses, which is actually stemmed for them to then become entrepreneurs themselves. And we've had about 4 startups that have stemmed from our program in the 5 years that we've been here. So it's kind of a combination of both.
So that's really cool. And I think that's really the whole point of innovation. It has to be collaborative. It has to come from all different sources. You've got money coming from the sources that you've mentioned and the students and their ideas, but also kind of honing in on their business skills and kind of moving forward together. When the multinationals come and invest in your program, do they take any ownership in the companies or no?
Not usually. And so a lot of them have their own accelerator incubator programs that they wish for our students to come into. And so once they get handed off to their accelerator incubator programs, then that's up to the students and that corporation as to the piece of the pie that they may get there. But when they're at the university, the students own all of the ideas all the way through. And then it's up to them to use resources to file intellectual property or gain ownership further. So.
Yeah, it's very exciting. You had mentioned that 4 or 5 businesses had come through. Can you share what those are?
Yeah. So our oldest, most established one is called Prime Roots. They're making deli slices and bacon with koji protein. Then next up would be Black Sheep Foods, which is making a plant-based lamb alternative. They're really working on flavors and fat, specifically innovation there. And then we have Sundial Foods, which is one of our younger, most recent ones, making a chicken wing with like a crispy skin on the outside. And then one of the most youngest one is called Impact Foods, and they're working on a tuna seafood alternative.
Hurry, Impact Foods. I have had Black Sheep. I've had Sundial. I have had Prime Roots. And all of them outstanding. That Prime Roots koji pate.
Yeah,
no, hold me back.
I haven't tried it, but I've heard it's really good. I'm also really excited for our most recent team. They're not quite a company yet, but they just stemmed out of our previous course. They're making a hard and soft boiled egg, which is like pretty phenomenally just like the hard boiled egg.
Wonderful. So cool. Well, get yourself some koji pate. And then of course, Black Sheep is so incredibly awesome. I've had them as well. And Sundial, I haven't had their chicken wings, but I've had their chicken drumstick.
Ooh,
Where
nice.
there's like, yeah. Okay, so you're talking about innovation that's coming through the lab. Let's riff off of what Bill said before. So you're seeing hybrid products. Maybe if you, Bill, you could give some examples if you're allowed to share. What when you say, we're seeing new innovation, it might not be beyond or impossible, as Celia was saying. What do you see coming that you can share with us that's new innovation or new approaches to the marketplace?
Yeah, we've kind of made I was known a little bit to work with protein extraction and concentrations, and as a result of that, we are starting to see some new crops that are coming at us that are not been talked about a lot before, and it may not necessarily be grain based or root based or suppression based. It could be parts of the plant where we're actually doing the extraction protein. So that's going to bring some new functionality to the program. It's bringing new flavors to the programs. Those are one of the areas uh, we've been working with a company called Millie Milk from New York City. That one's that's known, and they've launched products that are actually mixed botanicals, dairy alternative beverage space, and we help them develop their number of SKUs. They have products are available by subscription. It's a freeze product, which was a technical challenge for us to find a co-manufacturer that could freeze dry in bigger quantities than they're normally done. But they've done very well, and we're starting to see that trend of mixed botanicals even creeping into more of these alternative beverage spaces. So no longer will it be just almond milk, cashew milk. It'll be a mixed botanical of some sort. So those are a couple of things we're seeing. We're doing a lot with bioactive components being extracted from various plant-based foods now. We're working with one company sharing a flavor potentiator, and Elizabeth, I know you're familiar with that company. We've been deeply involved with them for the past year and had an NSF grant come through for that work, and now we're going for round 2 on that. So those are, I would say we've maybe not done as much actual product development as we did even a year ago, but now today we're moving more towards doing more new novel ingredients, and we're still seeing a good mix though of new products that are coming along too. That a couple of ones that Celia mentioned have had some of our fingers in that at one time also.
So this is kind of surprising to me. When you said novel ingredients, I thought you were going to say things like, "Oh, we're looking at duckweed and fava bean." I didn't think you'd be saying we're looking at different parts of the plant or bioactive. For those of us who aren't scientists, as both of you are, what is bioactive? What's a bioactive ingredient? What are you talking about?
So a bioactive ingredient is simply an ingredient that has an effect, physiological effect on the body. It can be an antioxidant, which we've known about for years, but it can also be something like a flavor potentiator that acts with one of the taste receptors to elicit a response. So that's generally how we classify bioactives.
I understand this. Okay. So some sort of change happens either in the tasting or of maybe would it be intended for a product like reducing stress and reducing inflammation, these kind of prebiotic notions?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's correct. That's correct.
Celia, are you seeing the same thing, or tell me what you're seeing?
Yeah, I had actually, I had down that I think ingredient innovation and expansion of ingredients beyond the typical like soy, wheat, or pea is really what we've been finding in all these products. We're really seeing an expansion into new ingredients. So, from the protein side, you're really looking at more like beans or like, for instance, chickpea, fava beans, lentils, so on and so forth. But then there's also these interesting seaweed or leaf components where you're looking at, like you said, more of the whole plant and trying to take components out of those. But I actually had a question for Bill. Would an adaptogen be considered a bioactive? Do you know? Because I know that's a key hit word right now in foods.
Yeah, adaptogens would fit into that category of bioactive components also.
Okay.
And an adaptogen, tell us what that is, just so we can all know. Celia?
Oh, sure.
You've got the better
So
audio.
from what I understand of adaptogens, they are compounds that you eat that your body then adapts and kind of it works with your body and your digestive system to really change and morph and kind of adapt and function in a better way. So it's kind of a complementary, instead of just eating and your body breaking it up and it being done for, it's actually having just as much interaction on your body as your body is to it. Bill, you can add on to that if I explained it wrong.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is probably prebiotics were some of the first adaptogens that we saw. We knew when we digest prebiotics, they were influencing our gut microflora, changing our gut microflora. I think now we're kind of at a point in the nutritional sciences where we know what we can mix to get even a better influence on that gut microflora when we know what the actual composition is of a person that's having some issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is very interesting because you have a confluence of two things going on. I want to level set and explain for the listeners and then ask you a detailed question on it. So now we're talking about personalized or enhanced nutrition. And that definitely is a driver of shifting the global food supply system. Ultimately, we have to feed more people more nutritiously, using fewer resources in a shorter amount of time, creating less damage. And so here you have part of that equation, which is personalized nutrition. Some people need more prebiotics. So if they're not getting enough, dark leafy greens in their system, perhaps, and they want to have a better gut microbiome, and I'm not the scientist here, so you two both stop me and correct me if I've got this wrong, but they might lean towards adaptogens and bioactive nutrients. Then we have the other part of shifting the global food supply system, which is just the resources available to us, that being land and water and trees. And we just need a smarter, more efficient system if we're going to feed a growing population. So you have these two drivers going on at the same time. So my question to you both is, I'll start with Celia and then go to Bill. What is driving innovation? So we have all this innovation, but is it just, I'm a student and I want to have a fun idea and let's see where this goes? Or are there real drivers behind it?
It kind of depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, Bill, you can go ahead. Go.
Yeah, Bill, go, and then we'll go to Celia.
I was going to say, we're actually seeing things a little bit different than Celia because most of our entrepreneurs coming to us are, frankly, either in their late 30s to even early 60s. So we're seeing people that are adapting away from a carnivore's diet towards flexitarian and starting to move even more towards making sure they're getting quite a bit more plant-based materials into their diets. So I think part of it's going to be more publicity about the benefits of a plant-based diet. Whether you're truly a vegetarian, vegan, or you're a flexitarian, people are driving towards that because they know it's going to be healthier for them in the long run. I think people are also a little bit more cognizant of the fact that we stay in this environment for our grandchildren, great-grandchildren. In order to do that, we're going to have to make drastic changes along the way in how we even raise animals or move away from being more dependent on animals. And as a result of that, we're moving towards plants. At some point, somebody will figure out how to make protein and other nutrients out of air, but we're still a long way yet.
Sure. I would say that innovation curve is at least 10 years away, particularly out of air. We might have cultivated meat from cells, maybe 8 to 10 years in any kind of major scale way. But Celia, maybe you can riff off of what Bill was saying. So what do you see in your lab as driving the innovation?
Yeah, I mean, beyond the things that Bill had already said, driving, just the next generation of innovation, making things better, making things less processed or healthier. I think also, especially from my end, I'm seeing from a younger generation perspective as to what drives them and what's motivating them, because that's kind of more of the dynamic that I'm seeing. And so a lot of them are asking these questions as to, oh, why are we making these foods the way we're making them? What are we making them out of? But then it's the deeper rooted of the environment, the health, and or the animal welfare concerns. I kind of always bucket them in the 3 buckets. And I would say like environment and health are probably the most impactful from what I see from the younger generation. Also better understanding what they're eating too. I get asked this question almost every lecture that I give, like, how does that affect my health? How is that better for me or worse for me? And so there's a lot of like unanswered questions, but I think it's really deep rooted in their like motivation and desire.
If you had to rank them, what would be the rank of the 3 in the bucket when the students ask the questions?
So I would say probably health is the main, or like processing. I get asked a lot about like, is this processed food good for me or bad for me? And so there's a lot of, especially, you know, we've seen in all these articles lately, I think there's an overall lack of understanding of what is processing, what people define as processing. It's kind of different throughout society. So I would say health and processing. But then as they learn more about the climate impacts or the environment impacts of, you know, different types of food sources, that's where a lot of their questions are starting to come from. But then, of course, rooting it back to, you know, kind of how Bill had said, I'm teaching like engineers, chemists, biologists, and they're just so intrigued with this technology and morphing existing technologies from established industries to use within foods to really advance like our food system. So it's kind of coming from both angles as well.
That's cool to hear. Bill, I want to ask you if you see that demand for your services has not slowed, and if you see funding still coming through, and you see no lack of ideas or innovation regarding novel ingredients, where do you think the market is going? And maybe even before you answer that, how does this align with what you're seeing in the newspapers, which is almost starting to feel, from my perspective, like an organized attack rather than pure information? And any thoughts on that?
I don't know that I want to touch that one at this point, but I do think that funding has slowed down a little bit. I think the funding is still there. I think what we're seeing right now is that people are doing a lot more due diligence before they do fund a company. Probably a year ago, it was a little bit easier to get money on a good idea. Right now, from what we're hearing, talking to a variety of investors, both big and small, most of them are doing quite a bit more due diligence and actually want to see if the product has a chance of surviving. I know that a finished food product has a 99% chance of failure in the market. And the new food ingredient isn't much better. It's probably around 98%. So as a result of that, they're getting a little bit more cautious on their due diligence. Not necessarily because they're having to tighten their belts yet, but they can see it coming. And you know, as far as some of the public maybe backlashing against plant-based foods, I think it's like everything else in life. It's probably a small minority that's kind of out there trying to push some agendas in different ways. But I think the consumer is demand that we start producing good tasting products. It's you kind of go back to the old days when we were doing fat-free foods, and you couldn't make a fat-free food taste good. Well, we're kind of at the same point now with a lot of these plant-based foods. If you don't start improving the taste, the flavor, and the texture of that product, then the consumer is going to turn away from us and revert back to where they were. So it's us that are in the product development areas to kind of keep pushing ahead and improving these products.
I want to riff off of what you're saying. So the CEO of Maple Leaf Foods says that he anticipates plant-based growth will be 10 to 15% long-term. Those are very good numbers in the food industry. Food can grow at 2 to 3%. So to see 10 to 15% is a very nice return, but it's predicated on innovation. It's not going to hit those numbers if it doesn't have innovation. The CEO of Impossible Foods, the new CEO, Peter, says the same thing. It's all predicated on innovation, and we can get there, this 10 to 15% growth, but it's got to be in the innovation. So what you two do in your Premier Labs is so critical to the overall growth of the whole sector. But that said, I just want to throw a caveat in here that I'm not saying it's going this way, but let's say that plant-based foods did go the way of fat-free. Like it was just hard to get fat-free, taste good, and people turned back to just like, oh, give me the thing. But I would advocate if you can't really do that with plant-based, because then there's that climate argument, and you're going to see that industries just not going to let the consumer be the only deciding factor here. Industry needs to shift its business practices because carbon pricing is coming, scrutiny from the SEC about your emissions through the supply chain. That would be scope 1, 2, and 3, it's referred to. So there are all these other pressures pushing innovation. Again, lucky you guys, you're at the crux of everything, pushing innovation such that the consumer can't turn away. We have got to make that product good enough because you just don't have enough water, flat out. Animal agriculture takes 42% of the world's clean water. So, and in climate change, that's going to be even a worse number. So I'll throw it to Celia and say, what are your predictions for the marketplace? What will we be seeing? What will be the products that make it out of the innovation lab that really get there and, in your opinion, are adopted?
Yes, this is a great question. I honestly try to bucket these into like different categories, and it kind of morphs with probably like the future on of, what are we going to see in the next year to few years versus what are we going to see in more long term. And I think in the next, the next products reaching the marketplace are going to be the new products that don't exist on the market today that are really, there's that gap missing within there, such as, a hard boiled egg or a whole muscle fillet type meat, which doesn't really exist today. And I think technologies are advancing very heavily to actually bring those products to market, along with function and nutrition. So having a milk that mimics dairy milk, complete functionality, complete taste, so on and so forth. So I think those are what's going to be coming, but I think there is a shift as to the types of products. I don't think that will advance forever, personally, at least, based off of what I see. I think there will be a shift in the marketplace, maybe not towards only mimicking animal products, but really towards making more holistic products around less processing, whole foods that are really geared towards the environment, the health, both environment, health, and animal welfare concepts versus something like a lot of these mimicking meat products. They're much more environmentally focused, but they're not really health focused. And so they're kind of not hitting all of those three buckets, which I think would really help the impact along with the understanding.
I want to get Bill's thoughts on that. But before I do, I'll add one piece of the equation here is that, you say mimicking, let's say, a milk, but actually you can make that milk better than actual milk because there are a lot of studies that say animal milk promotes cancer. So you can make better health claims. And we're talking about these adaptogens and really bringing personalized health to these products. So maybe it'll mimic in taste, but it can actually be a better than product. That said, and as much as we talk about health, the truth is sometimes you just want birthday cake. Sometimes you go out for a burger and you don't order the side salad. You order fries, even though you had the choice of a side salad. You didn't do it. You did the fries. So, consumers like choices. Like sometimes you want to go to town with your face in a bag of chips. So I think what's exciting to me is to see the plethora of choices that the consumer is going to have that they don't even have right now. So enough of me speaking. Bill, if you could riff off of what products do you think are going to take hold and really be adopted in the marketplace? I'd love to hear it.
I think, I agree with a lot of things Celia said. I do believe we're going to see kind of a intermediate step, probably with a lot of hybrid products also appearing. As much as we may hate to hear, I do think that the meat industry, they've made Tyson, Cargill, JBS, they've all made a run at hybrid products over the last 5 years. And I think it's just a timing issue. They'll come back with better products. We'll see a stopgap occurring there. Similarly, when cell culture meat is able to be produced at mass quantities, I think we'll see more hybrid products jumping in there to begin with, since they're going to have a long road to go yet to get to that three-dimensional structure of the steak. So I do think there'll be some things there. I think the other thing we're going to see is that we're starting to move to the center of the grocery store. And we're going to stop emphasizing the fact that this is a plant. We're going to put the product out there and it's going to be plant-based. Unless somebody releases labels and label declarations, they're not going to realize that it's an all plant-based product. So I think there's, not that we're trying to camouflage the fact that it's all plant-based, but all French fries and potato chips are a vegetable. The healthiest product, but they are a vegetable.
Yeah. And I eat them. I eat them both regularly. Gosh darn it. And I tell myself, since I've been a teenager, I've been trying to lose 7 pounds. I'm still trying to lose the same 7 pounds. So, on a survey, everybody says they want healthier options. And yet I still have 7 pounds to lose. So you see, I am not alone, I think, in that. So very interesting. I'm just, so it's such a hopeful perspective for the consumer. I see the press as being so negative, and it's unfortunate because I think the consumer has so much to gain here. And of course, one doesn't flip a switch and have no meat in a matter of 24 hours. So the consumer is just going to, in addition to all their current meat choices, they get all these other choices. How fun for the consumer to just have so much to choose from. So, and you said, Bill, like, oh, maybe we don't like to hear it, but the meat companies are coming back with better iterations. I love to hear it because I don't just want their innovation and their distribution channels. I want their advertising dollars, because soon you're just going to hear how cool it is for the dude to eat vegetables. And I'm waiting for those campaigns. So I think it's very exciting. I will say, just to wrap on one thing, we're saying like, oh, maybe the plant-based products aren't the healthiest. Yeah, nobody thinks they're a carrot. They came in a box. They have a barcode, but they're healthier. So for that flexitarian who's trying to be healthier, whose doctors told them like, cut back the red meat already, you're in danger, my friend. This is a step. It's 20, 30%, 40% better. Is it perfect? No, but I don't want that flexitarian to not have that option to pick something healthier at the July 4th barbecue. So I hate to riff on those products. They serve a very important place in the marketplace, and I hope that they stay, and they should stay, in my opinion. Okay. So now,
thing to that in the marketplace too.
Please.
I think we're also a little bit clouded, especially by the news in like the last week, thinking like, what is going on? This, this industry could potentially be dying. It maybe doesn't hold purpose based off of, what people are saying. But I think what a lot of people don't recognize or are not remembering is how far we've come in the last 10 years. So 10 years ago, when I started eating plant-based, it was like tofu and tempeh. And then there were places like Light Life or Maple Leaf Foods that, started to make imitation products. And so we actually have been on this journey for quite some time, not just since 2018, which is when, some of these articles were saying, it started then and, no one's adopting this. But in reality, it started a long time ago, and a lot of people have been adopting it more than they think they have. So.
Bill, any thoughts?
I agree. I kind of liken it to how Cracker Barrel and Boston Market and several other chains grew rapidly in their early years. Then all of a sudden they hit this wall of, oh my gosh, our sales are starting to decline. And they realized they had overbuilt. Frankly, I believe that some of the big alternative meat companies that have been in the news the past couple of weeks now probably did something similar. I know when we were recruiting for a protein chemist, I was up against both the big two. And, they're out there trying to hire 20 protein chemists, and they've got a lot more money to offer than I do as a state agency. So I think they just overbuilt. I think that they're going to retrench their strategies now and become stronger. I think, Elizabeth, you and I talked in Switzerland. I think a lot of companies right now have been kind of getting in their lanes a little bit over the past year now. And I think that's had an impact on them also. But we've got to move beyond chicken nuggets. Nothing wrong with chicken nuggets, but we've got to move beyond the chicken nuggets. And I think now you're starting to see even some of the in ground beef. We're starting to see now where we're starting to come across now with some other things now. So.
Yeah, I agree. And again, back to innovation, that only happens because of the work that you two do. So grateful for that. But also, again, back to my interest in the consumer, we want deli slices. Like, it's got to be more than just a burger. We want deli slices and chicken strips and steak. Beyond Meat is trialing state in the Midwest. So in Jewel Osco, for those of you in the Midwest, you might know the name Jewel Osco. They are hot and heavy trialing things in the Midwest, which I think is great. It's about time that steak makes its debut. So very exciting here. Okay, well, as we kind of wrap, if you will, is there anything else that you'd like to add about what's going on in the again, I think of the consumer and I think it's very confusing for them. So there's some industry attacks or from both sides. Let's just say, the industry is having a boxing match and that leaves the consumer so confused. Is there anything that you'd like the consumer to understand to help them break through the cloud of what's going on right now? Celia.
Celia,
And
I'll let you go
Yeah.
first.
Sure. I think for me, I want the consumer to, also basically be their own critic and their own advocate in a way. And so it's a matter of also paying attention and not just believing everything that they hear. So obviously, I agree that some of these products out there aren't any healthier than a meat product, arguably depends on who you talk to, depending on the type of product. And it's good for the consumer to be aware of that. It's also good for them to understand the reason as to why these products have been made, whether it is for health, whether it's for environment. And honestly, it's so clear in like society that increasing your vegetable intake and decreasing your meat intake is going to improve health. It's going to make us live longer. And I guess my desire is that eventually society starts grabbing onto that, which will then help us adopt more of these types of products and understand those trends. And also, it doesn't hurt to ask questions. And I'd rather them ask questions than them just read an article and then believe what's said in that one article. That's the frustrating piece.
Bill?
I think Celia hit upon something important. The consumer needs to speak up. And likewise, the companies that are out there producing these products. The good news is a lot of people from outside the food industry came into the food industry with a lot of these new products. The bad news, a lot of people outside the food industry came in these food products and they didn't really understand the supply chain to the consumers because they were selling products that probably were selling themselves in the electronics world. So really, I think the consumer does need to provide more feedback to the big companies that are out there doing plant-based foods. And that has to be constructive criticism that those processors have to take account for and hold themselves accountable for improving their products. There's been criticism about a lot of the big two in particular about the unhealthiness of their products. Have they changed them a little, but not enough to really reflect what the consumer is trying to tell them?
I wonder, is the consumer telling them or is the media telling them? Because there's a lot of, a little of both. I mean, just so that folks know, journalism is dying, if not dead. So most press releases are given to the journalists. And then I say this as a journalist, and then they reprint what they're given. Investigative journalism is very expensive. No one has time for it. And they just can't hire for this anymore. So when you're reading the press, this is really to Celia's point, you are not reading the independent press, even from the plant-based side or the meat side. They're just copying and pasting and printing and going for the next clickable link. That's what journalism does today, 9 times out of 10. So that consumer role and their self-education is so important. And we all saw it during COVID. People took their health back into their own hands. They had time to cook. And I understand people are back at work and they don't have time to cook, their own vegetables, let's say, anymore. So foods have to come to them and be convenient. But they also had time to Google and they had time to research how to better my gut microbiome. That's why these press onslaughts are happening, so that when people Google, they can't get to the bottom of it anymore. It can be a tad nefarious, if you will. So it's really, I encourage that consumer to take control and hold on to the control they had over their health during COVID and keep that mojo, because educating yourself is going to be such a big part of this. And the consumer plays an incredibly powerful and valuable role in all of this. And so it's all hands on deck as we change the global food supply system. Okay, kind of some exit questions as we wrap up really quickly. These are meant to be like 1-sentence answers. So I'll start with Bill and then head to Celia. Bill, what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
I think back when I made the transition from dairy proteins to soy proteins, I wish I'd have started exploring more plant-based proteins instead of just soy back then.
Ah, that's a good one. I never hear that. Celia, what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
More so in regards to food. Food is designed to be really affordable and cheap, like obtainable. Innovation is not cheap to make. And so like trying to pair the two is actually really difficult when you're in a startup world or innovation sector.
Yeah, right. I can see that. Okay, you are running around, Celia. You are running around and your day is not going as you had hoped. What's the one phrase you tell yourself to get yourself back in the groove?
I mean, if I were to go by that, just keep swimming. But I like to remind myself, really, if we're better off having 100% of the people putting 10% of effort towards like sustainability and a better life around us than 10% of the people putting 100% effort towards sustainability and the life around them.
Ooh, so everybody, did you get that? Even if you can only do 10%, do it. Everybody do it. Do your shift. If you can shift twice a week to a plant-based whatever, do it. If you can, save up your pennies and put your solar panels on your roof. Now I know that's a big ask, but if you whatever you can do it. This is why, little side note, this is why the Boston Consulting Group came out with a study that said plant-based innovation investing, so investing in alternative proteins and plant-based innovation, is 3 times to 40 times more impactful than investing in solar energy or electric vehicles, because those are big asks for people. Most people can't turn in their car and get an electric vehicle. Eeks, it's $60,000. That's very expensive. But you can let your fingers do the walking over to the plant-based burger, plant-based steak. And that's not a big ask. That's maybe 99 cents more, maybe $1.25 more. So, but everybody, Celia's point, hands on deck. Everybody do what you can. Do what you can. Bill, what do you say to yourself to get yourself back in the game?
I try to set every day. At the end of the day, I try to vent off all my frustrations and go to bed thinking the day's done. Tomorrow will start off. The day starts good as long as I wake up. God, it'll go good until somebody screws it up again. But by the same token, I try to get all the frustrations out of the evening. And a lot of times my poor wife catches a lot of that. But it's just my way of at least going to bed and trying not to think about things. And again, I wake up in the morning, the heart's still going. I'm in good shape for next.
And a big key to that is getting enough sleep. So for those of you who are listening who work really hard, get in your 8 hours at least. That's my goal always. Okay,
I don't
staying
know what
with
that
Bill.
one means, unfortunately.
No, you don't have the 8 hours down? Okay.
No.
We'll talk later. Bill, staying with Bill, you have that busy day. It's not going your way. So you're running around and you didn't have time for lunch. What is your go-to snack?
Oh, my go-to snack is usually some nuts of some sort. That's usually
so good, so delicious.
Because it's shelf stable, and I can reach in there and grab a handful of nuts and keep going.
Yeah, when I'm craving fat, I usually dive into some nuts. I mean, it's just salty and it's fatty and it's good. Yeah, okay. Celia, what's your go-to snack?
I'd have to say, as a meal replacement, hummus and vegetables and pretzels, something like that. Something with hummus.
Hard to go wrong. And for sometimes people ask me like, well, oh my gosh, how would I do it? How would I try plant-based? And I say like, oh my God, don't overthink it. You're already eating guacamole. You're already eating spicy black bean burgers. You're already eating falafel. You're already eating hummus. I mean, there's so much out there that you're already doing. Couscous and pasta with tomato sauce. You're already doing these, pasta puttanesca. There's lots out there. Okay, Celia, what are we always going to find in your fridge?
Probably oat milk goes in my coffee every morning.
Bill, what am I always going to find in your fridge?
A variety of hot sauces.
Oh, that's a good one.
Food. I like hot food. Yeah.
Of course you do, Bill. Of course you do. Well, I want to thank you both for all of the work that you do and for this incredible conversation. There's so much to take away from this conversation, everybody. Mostly that Bill and Celia are at the center, focal point of all of the change that is coming in our global food supply system for the environment, for our health, for animals. All of this wonderful news giving consumers more and more choice, but that does mean that the consumers got a job to do. They too have to educate themselves. Can't can't just take for granted what this publication puts out or that publication puts out. It's not, journalism at this point really isn't your friend, so you got to do that research yourself. I would advocate that even the most processed of processed things is going to be a tad bit better than meat, and the less processed it is, the better, the more you move up that health spectrum. So, but even the processed foods, at least they don't have trimethylene oxide or animal heme or cholesterol or these things, which are tricky business. But of course, folks, you want to be as less as, when you're trying to be healthy, sometimes you just want birthday cake and you're not trying at all. But when you're trying to be healthy, you lighten up on the processed foods and you go for those whole veggies. Come on, folks, that's always going to be the answer. And we know that even when our head's in a bag of chips. And I speak from experience. So I want to thank you all, everybody, for being here. And Celia and Bill, stay put, don't go anywhere. But everybody on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, I will see you all next Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Hi.